Hi, my name's Steve Riley. I'm a graphic design lecturer at Solihull College. Welcome. Nice to see you, although I can't see anything at the moment. I can just see my own PowerPoint. So we will speak a little bit later on. What I'll do first is just go through the PowerPoint slides, and then there will be an opportunity at the end for questions and answers, which I will try and get as many questions and answers answered before 6:45 when we have to end the talk. Okay, so right, next slide. Okay, so obviously we're looking for hardworking students, creatively curious, and that's really important, because ultimately we're teaching you skills, but we're also teaching you to be creative, and that's about problem solving. That's about, as it says here, being curious, and kind of being able to think creatively and think practically to be able to solve problems, because ultimately that's what a creative is. Obviously, we expect to see a commitment to your chosen subject. That goes without saying. But one of the things that we really need is a high standard of attendance and punctuality, and being able to meet deadlines. If you're a graphic designer that can't meet deadlines, then obviously that is a significant issue. So deadlines are really important, but that kind of commitment to the cause, that commitment to the course, and the commitment to your studies is really important, and that's really very obvious in your attendance and punctuality. Okay, so there's a few things here. What do I need to get to place? Right, so we're talking about the level 3 diploma in graphic design. Now, ideally, that's 4 GCSEs at C and above, or grade 4 and above. We would prefer a creative subject. I think it's quite difficult sometimes if, say, you've chosen your options at school when you're in year 9 and you didn't choose a creative subject, but you've changed your mind and wanted to do a creative subject afterwards. That kind of causes a bit of a problem, because it means you haven't had that creative experience. So what we would normally do in that instance is suggest a level 2, which is why level 2 is on the slide there. So really, we would like an English GCSE at grade 4 or C, and art or related subjects. So it really depends on what you do. Graphic design's a bit of a funny one. So arts are kind of, everyone knows what art is. That's fairly standard. But graphic design at school really varies. In my experience, it really varies. So sometimes it is pure graphic design, and you're designing logos and designing posters, which is graphic design. And sometimes you're doing things like product design, which isn't quite what graphic design is. Or sometimes it might be computer aided design. So what I don't mean by that is Photoshop. What I mean by that is kind of making 3D models and things like that. So whilst all of that is fine, graphic design is quite a specific set of disciplines, which I'll show you later on and we'll talk about. But any creative GCSE is absolutely fine. If you like I say, if you haven't got a creative GCSE, we would suggest a level 2, which is a year. Okay, the other thing is that we'd need to see a portfolio of work. So that's really kind of it's a getting to know you. So obviously in the interview, hopefully if we get to speak to you face to face, which we may or may not do, we don't know, but the portfolio really tells us a lot about you. It tells us a lot about your creative experience. It tells us a lot about your skills. It tells us an awful lot of everything. So I think the more that we see, the better. The stuff that you do at school, fine, we'd love to see that, see how you think through a problem creatively, but also we'd like to see stuff that you do outside. So if you're making videos, if you're taking photographs, if you're kind of making your own thing, if you're doing your own drawings, we would like to see those as well, because that tells us a little bit about you. So the portfolio is really important. If you don't achieve a grade C or grade 4 in English or maths, you will have to retake. And that's part of your timetable. That's all built in. But that's part, you go anywhere and that will be exactly the same. as part of the course as well, you'll be doing 30 hours of work experience. So that might be an off-site thing if you can find a placement. Now, it's very difficult for us to be able to provide a placement in the creative industries for all of our students, simply because you always use this example, but if we were doing engineering, for example, we could perhaps contact Jaguar Land Rover and they would be able to accommodate a huge amount of students. So we'd probably be able to get all our students in there straight away. However, in the creative industries, they tend to be quite a lot smaller. So it means that we're probably going to have to manage an awful lot of different placements. So we can't actually do that ourselves. So that's one way of doing it. The other way is that we do live project briefs. So as a graphic designer, it is really important that you have experience of doing those live briefs, a client brief. It'll be something that comes through to us, that it might be a logo, it might be a poster, it might be whatever. There are all sorts of different things. We worked for a record company in the past. We worked for, you know, a lot of different, Solihull Council. We've done an awful lot of different things in the past. So there will be something as part of the course that is a live project, and that can contribute towards your 30 hours. Okay, so we've got a really good support network if there are any additional support needs. I've worked at a few colleges in my time, and Solihull is by far the best and the most supportive that I've experienced. So if that is something that you're concerned about, have confidence, because Solihull do that really well. Yes, so as I've said, you know, if you do not achieve the grades you're predicted, we'll offer you a place on the next appropriate level, and that's part of the nature of the interview process. We'll make sure that we think you're on the right course for the right level. But if, you know, in terms of grades and things like that, if you're accepted at the college, you've got a place on a course, and you know, hopefully it's the course that you applied to do. But in some cases it might be that you do a level 2, which is an art and design course rather than a specific graphic design course, but that's a year, and then that can take you on to the level 3 graphics if you don't get the grades. What we do at the start of the year is have a probation period, which is the first 6 weeks, and this works in 2 ways. This is to ensure that you're on the right course as a student, and you're happy, and it's what you signed up for. And it's, you know, sometimes students do move around a little bit in the first couple of weeks, but also from our point of view, we want to make sure that you're not struggling and you're on the right course. And if there are any issues behaviorally or, you know, attendance wise, then we can kind of address that in the first 6 weeks. So it is a probation period. Yeah, so that's that. Okay, what we try and do, and this really varies, but what we try and do is we offer a level, you know, a kit that allows students to work independently. You know, some stuff that you might have already, some people might not have anything at all. So we provide a kit, and you can kind of have various levels of those kits depending on what you need, you know, what you need. But it allows students to be able to work on the projects independently, and it really varies between £80 and £150. So it's just worth bearing in mind. The college does support students really well, for, you know, students from low income backgrounds, really well financially. They're very generous, and the things like the kits and trips and things like that will be taken into consideration in the finance application, and that will happen right at the start of the academic year. So we usually go on some trips in the year. Most of those are going to be, if we're allowed, but you know, we haven't had any yet, for obvious reasons. But under normal circumstances, we go to galleries, we go to exhibitions, we go and see things, and we don't necessarily have a standard set of stuff that we do, because we're responsive to what exhibitions are happening in what city. We might go to a city or a location to start a project. You might get some primary research where you start the project, but also you know, it's just to sort of underpin and enhance your learning. So I think you know, expect those, and those day trips are compulsory as part of the program. We also do usually, not this year, but we usually do an overseas trip every year. We've been to New York, we've been to Paris a number of times, we've been to Florence, we've been to Venice, we've been to Barcelona, been to quite a few different places over the years. I've usually gone on all of these trips. It's hard work, so don't think it's a holiday, not for me anyway. But these trips are, it's an art and design based trip. There's usually some work involved in it, a project that might begin, or we go to, we go and see art galleries and go and kind of experience the cities that we go to. They're not compulsory because of the cost, but even though they're not compulsory, a lot of students do take advantage of them, but the college supports students financially for those trips as well. Okay, so if you gain a place, you'll be offered the place, and you can accept or decline. It's just useful for us to know if if you change your mind or if you find a place somewhere else. It's useful for us to know. So if you could let us know. And the college will be in touch with you during the summer to tell you about the start dates and some induction information, the things that you need to bring in, and you will be sent a summer project to do, which will usually pick up in the early part of the course. So the course, the graphics course, in fact all of our art and design courses are by UAL, which is the University of the Arts London. They're really flexible, which is great, because just like some of you might have chosen some options when you are in year 9, and by the time you're in year 11, those options might not be the ones that you would have chosen. So there's quite a lot of change that happens in this period. So UAL allows us to be really flexible. So even though you're on a graphic design course, it doesn't mean that you're stuck doing graphic design, although most students are quite happy doing graphic design because that's what they've chosen to do. But there is a kind of flexibility that moves through the UAL program. So I have had most students go on to do graphic design, but I have had students go into 3D design, into architecture, into theatre and set design, into furniture design, into games design, which is kind of related, all sorts of different things. So and photography, and into fine art as well, and illustration. So there's lots of different courses that can be taken from this graphic design course. Don't feel like you're hemmed into a particular, one particular sector, because actually the way the qualification runs, it deals with the creative process. So it's about creative problem solving, it is about thinking your way out of a problem, it is about developing ideas. So all of those kind of elements, they're the accessible components, and all of those elements, if you really get on board with those, all of those elements are part of the creative process, and that's across all creative subjects. So you should be able to quite easily transfer into a different subject area within the creative industries, at least. In the first and the second year, there is a final major project, and that final major project usually runs from about February to the end of the course, and that's effectively, that's your project. You write a project in the area that you're most interested in. You've got autonomy of what the kind of project that you want to do, and that's the unit that is graded. So the others are just pass or fail. So you've got to pass all of those units. Before that, you've got to pass those units, but there isn't a pass, merit or distinction. It's just pass or fail. Hopefully pass, obviously. Your FMP, so the final major project, the final units in the first and the second year, they're the ones that give you the pass, merit and distinction. And I think this is a good idea, because I think a lot of the time at schools, schools sort of train you to chase grades. If you want the best grades, you want to be kind of safe in that, and that sometimes stops risk taking, and risk taking is really important as a creative, really important, because risks, sometimes it pays off and you're a genius, and sometimes it doesn't work and it's not quite so straightforward, but you learn a lot in the process. So part of the ethos of UAL is kind of taking risks and taking chances and trying to make things work and trying to solve problems and learn that way. So by the time you get to the final project, you have some of that experience and you're able to kind of manage that without necessarily worrying about chasing the grade, but the grades come from the final project. I hope that makes sense. As I've mentioned before, deadlines are really important. Your project briefs that you will have, they outline the kind of work that we want you to do, and it gives you very clear deadlines. And then you'll get written and verbal feedback and the ability to improve the work. Each student has a personal tutor and they deal with the course. They're the kind of go-to person for the students, and they deal with kind of pastoral issues as well, much like your form tutor, I guess, at school. Okay, so much of this stuff I've already said. I think all of those things are really important. Stretch and challenge, because actually, that is a hugely important thing to do in the creative industries. It is a competitive area, and I think you've got to be really good. You've got to be kind of pushing yourself as much as possible, and because you're up against quite a lot of competition. So I think that we will stretch and challenge you as you're at college, because we know that it's a difficult, it can be a difficult area to get in, and you've got to be really committed to it. All of that stuff I've mentioned, it's about problem solving, it's about exploring, it's about reflecting and thinking about what you've done and what you're going to do next, and engaging in the world. I mentioned going to cities to start, to take a load of primary source material to start a project, so taking notice of things, and using a range of sources, artists, going to galleries, etc., and open-minded, curious, open to feedback and discussion. That's all part of the fabric of being a creative. Okay, so this is a video which I shall play now.
Graphic design is everywhere you look, from the magazines you read to the websites you browse. Their style and look has been crafted by the creative eye of a designer. Study graphic design and you'll learn how to use industry-standard software in some of the best facilities in the region. Tutors with real sector insight will be on hand to help you work towards a career in advertising, branding, packaging design, animation, typography, and many more. Once you've completed the course, progress to higher education at the college or at university. Discover your future at Solihull College and University Centre.
Okay, let's try and get out of this. Right. Okay, so this is quite an important point. So most students, I mean, it seems at the moment that this is this is going to take a long time, but actually 2 years goes really quickly. So we kind of think about where you're going after the end of the course reasonably quickly. So even in the first year, we'll start, towards the end of the first year, we'll start to talk to you about what's next. And there are lots of options. Most students that do the course go on to higher education. So that's university level courses, and you'll be supported in whatever choice you make, what uni you want to go to, whether you want to stay at home or whether you want to go away, what kind of program you want to do. There's an awful lot of support you'll get as you go through the course. We also run some higher education courses at college. So as it says here, it's the professional creative practice course that we do, which I wrote last year, and we've started it for the first time this year. We've been doing higher education in the college for a long time. We've just kind of brought it all together under one umbrella course, and that's in association with Northampton University. So we do courses at college, and lots of students choose to stay with us, but like I say, most students go on to you know, a higher level course after the level 3. Now, that's not the only option, obviously. You can explore employment. That is very competitive, and you've got to be really, really good to compete against other people in the work environment, because a lot of those people will have degrees already. So you know, in my time doing this, my 23 years teaching, I've had a couple of people going straight into jobs, but they were absolutely brilliant. So I think realistically, that you're not probably going to be experienced enough by the end of the level 3 to go straight into a job. The other option are apprenticeships. Now, there aren't very many apprenticeships. There are some, but there aren't a huge amount of apprenticeships around for graphic design. I think there are some really good ones, but it all depends on the company that you work with. So we can support you with that, but there aren't, you know, a huge raft of them available. They're kind of, you know, in bits and bats, but you've got to kind of look for them. But we'll support you, and we'll kind of talk to you about that. But I think it's, you know, being a good creative is about kind of spending time developing your craft before you work. So whilst it's not right for everyone to go to university, and they don't feel necessarily ready to go to university, I think we ought to have that conversation to make sure it is the right choice at the end of the day. Okay, so what career paths are available after my course? Well, as I've already sort of said, there's an awful lot of different things that you can kind of go into. You know, all those things I've mentioned already. So, you know, you can go into advertising, you can go into all the design industry elements, so illustration, games design. Being a graphic designer overall covers lots of different things. So it covers kind of logo design, advertising, packaging, illustration, editorial design. I've said illustration already. Moving image, there's an awful lot of moving image. You see an awful lot of moving image at the moment. So, you know, we'll touch on that as we go, but you can kind of work in that sort of, you can make that a specialism, but you can do an awful lot of different things. But there's a few things on the screen there. Like I said, you know, if your creative process, the way that you go from the brief to the solution, that is kind of ubiquitous in the industry. So, you know, in theory, if you had an interest in fashion, what you learn on graphics can kind of feed you know how to do that, because it's about solving a problem. Okay, so the creative industries is an enormous employer. You know, there's an awful lot of jobs there. It is competitive, as I've said, but that's not a bad thing. It means that you raise your game, but there's a lot of jobs out there. Lots of people always want content, always. You know, just look at the amount of content that you see on every day. Most of that is done by graphic designers. There's an awful lot of stuff, and it rotates. This is stuff that you see on screen. It's stuff that you see in static advertising, billboards, you know, on the back of buses, you know, in all of the printed material. Graphic designers do all of that. So there's a lot of material, and it changes a lot. So there's lots of work. Just something to illustrate the fact that there are jobs. You know, it is a rich industry to get to, and there's lots of sort of possibility. But like I said, you've got to be competitive. So this is kind of talking about some of those thinking skills, some of those kind of underpinning creative skills that we'll kind of work with. Critical thinking, that's reflective, that's kind of responding to your the problem that you're solving. Digital fluency, communication. Ultimately, graphic design is about communication. It's about visual communication. You're communicating to an audience. That's the point. So we have to understand that. You will be collaborating at times. So diversity in teamwork, you'll have to be collaborating, because if you think about something like an advertising campaign, you'll probably be working with a photographer. You know, a lot of advertising campaigns, not all, but a lot of advertising campaigns have photography involved in it. Now, you probably wouldn't take the photograph. It may be that you do, but you probably won't take the photograph, but you'll be working with a photographer. So there's an awful lot of kind of underpinning skills and qualities that you learn as part of the course. Okay, so here's the work bit. So this is one of the studios. So we've got kind of some really decent kit. We've got up-to-date Macs with the up-to-date Adobe Creative Suite. We teach industry standard software because that's what you need, and it's updated regularly, as is the hardware as well. So the Macs are kind of updated, you know, relatively regularly. We often get students coming back from universities and sort of say that the college has got better kit than some of the universities. So actually we are really well set up, and you'll have really good access to that. We have a platform that we use called Moodle, which some of you might have used at school. There might be an equivalent at school, a virtual learning environment that all the material goes onto and you can access from home. So there won't be any times that you will be in the dark, because you've got access to all of that. Again, this year we've been using Microsoft Teams at times when we needed to teach online. Obviously, we prefer to teach a creative subject face-to-face. It is really important that we see you and we talk to you and we can kind of solve problems directly. That's much more difficult to do virtually, but there are some things like one-to-one tutorials we can do virtually, and some sessions, maybe lecture sessions or things that are a bit more general, that we can do online, but we'd prefer to see you face-to-face as much as possible. And you know, so that's what the studio looks like. Okay, so I'm just going to go through some work just to show some examples. This is a little, you know, a few years ago, this one now, but this was a final major project of a girl who designed a game, a kind of yeah, it was a game that she was, you know, an app on the iPhone, iPad, and she developed the aesthetic for it. So it was, you know, she developed it was based around Andy Warhol and pop art, and she kind of developed all these illustrations for the characters and the kind of idea for the game. It's quite a sweet little project, and these you know, this is part of the exhibition at the end of the year, so these were kind of, you know, 4-foot high cutouts. This is a font design project. This is a section of it. I couldn't put all of it in because there was loads of it, but basically this is another example of something that we used one of the college trips for. So we went to Paris, and this was last year, 2019, and this was about this was when the protests were happening, the Gilets jaunes protests were happening, and there was lots of evidence of graffiti and protest that was on the streets. So this student went around and photographed all the graffiti and all of these messages, all these political messages, and brought it back to college and made a book of about 15 different fonts based around this this language of protest. It was really quite a nice project. As I've said, you know, this is a you can see this is a photograph, but this was a student's final project, and she had a whole set of images there, and it was about kind of, you know, her little sister and children, and screens, that kind of contentious issue there, and the effect of screens on children. So even though she was on a graphic design course, she's choosing to communicate using photography, and that's fine. You know, UAL allows for that. That's absolutely fine. This is another final project of this was a rebranding. So this is kind of, you know, logo design, but it's kind of the livery and the rebranding of the relaunch of the Jordan Grand Prix team. So obviously, you know, as you can see, this is the livery of the car, but also there's the logo embedded into this as well. This is some illustration. So this was a live project that a student worked on, and she created a book basically. We had a guy who came to us, and he'd written this book and he wanted to kind of make it visual. He couldn't do it himself, so he kind of contacted us, and this student got on board. She really liked illustrating, and she created about 20 illustrations for this book, The Bear with the Scary Hair, and they were really quite sweet illustrations. She did a great job, and you know, she's now working with that author on the next book, so you know, opportunities arise. Again, more illustration, but different kinds of illustration. It's this is digital illustration, so obviously that is manual illustration. She put it together, you know, with the type and everything. She put it together digitally, but ultimately it was painting. This is digital illustration. This is using Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator, and obviously there's some branding and there's some illustration for a skateboard company here. And I think it is really important to point out at this time that this is like, graphic design isn't just digital. I mean, I think it can be, that's absolutely fine, but your manual skills are kind of as important as well. So there's a bit of both, but it's not just, it's not an IT subject, so it's not come to the college, sit on a computer the whole day. There are times, certainly at the start of a project, and depending on what the project is, but certainly at the start of the project, where you have to get your hands dirty, because it's a way to understand. Drawing is the quickest way to get an idea out of your head onto paper. It doesn't need to be utterly beautiful. It can be quite functional. That functionality can turn into beauty a bit later on, if that's, you know, if you draw and that's the way you're wired up. If you like digital processes, then that'll kind of happen quite relatively quickly. But really, we like to kind of get ideas down on paper quite quickly. So it is kind of, you know, you're wrestling with those ideas and you're pushing some ideas around, and it is a really quick communication tool. I've personally been in client meetings where the quickest way to try, you know, instead of talking about what a problem is, talking in abstract terms, actually just sketching out something quite quickly is the quickest way to get your point across. And you know, I fully stand by that. I think drawing is really important. So, you know, not everybody draws, but it is a communication tool, so kind of expect that. This is some editorial. This is a cover for Creative Review, but the student took the photographs themselves and kind of did a bit of post-production, was playing with the idea of, it was the Creative Review is a creative publication that comes out every month. And each year they do an annual, and their kind of theme, they use the A for the annual. So this was the project. So this student was kind of experimenting, exploring with lots of cutout A's in water, and lighting it in certain ways, and then photographing it. And then there's a bit of Photoshop post-production that went on there, and then presenting it as if it's the real thing. Packaging, and again, so this is a kind of ground up project. So we've got branding, you've got the kind of the name of the product. This product doesn't exist, so it's the name of the product, the brand that has been developed, so the logo has been developed, and the kind of, you know, the actual design for the packaging itself, and then it's been photographed. So there's lots of different skills involved in projects like this, and that's kind of the point. That's what graphic design, why graphic design is kind of interesting, because you're always doing lots of different things and each project is different, so it keeps it interesting. So there's a couple of different things here. The one on the left there is a kind of, I mean, the visual language there is of Avatar, but this was the kind of, this is a visual language that has been kind of used but updated for the next film in the series. So this student did this from the ground up, digital painting. So quite a high level of digital painting there. And then the one on the right is an advertising campaign for the Royal Shakespeare Company and the productions that they put on. And she took photographs of herself. So this is her actually in the photos, and you can kind of see that there's some Photoshop and some sort of double images going on there with the kind of strong typography running through the middle. Again, this is a live project that we did. So this was a competition project that we actually worked with Porsche, and and it was Porsche Classic Partners, actually, is the classic wing parts wing of Porsche, but they were racing a I can't remember what year it was, late 60s Porsche 911. And they wanted us to, or there was a competition to design the livery to celebrate 70 years of Porsche, and this car would then be raced around Europe in various race tracks in a classic series. One of our students won, and this was the result. So we got these quite jazzy press shots from Porsche, but quite it was a great opportunity for that student, because he was absolutely mad on cars. So it was a gift really for him, and then he got to go to one of the race meets and meet up with the drivers and things like that, so he was well happy. We also do competition briefs as well, and so these are some examples of the Star Packs Award, which we have entered every year for quite a number of years and done really well. So I think there's a number of examples here from different years. So the one in the top left was this year, so she won a gold award and the sponsor award for her design for a point of sale. The one underneath on the left there is a gin specialist, gin premium packaging for gin. Again, she won gold and a sponsors award. The one on the right was a very current ethical project about reusing. No, it's about kind of designing something that out of paper that would normally be made out of plastic. So it's kind of like an environmental project, and this was for hand cream. And she won a bronze for that. And there's another couple there, you can see 2016, 2017 gold award, another gold award and sponsor award. So we've done quite well with Star Packs in the past. So we try and give students those opportunities.
All right, well, thank you everyone for attending, and we hope you enjoy the presentation. If there's any parts of it that you missed, it is being recorded and will be uploaded to the website. And thank you, Steve, for your presentation.
Okay, no problem. Nice to not see you. I mean, there you go.